The studio lights dimmed for just a second, but it felt like eternity. Steve Harvey stood frozen at his podium, microphone trembling in his hand. In 40 years of television, he had never heard anything like what 14-year-old Diego Martinez had just whispered into the microphone. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating, while 300 audience members held their breath. It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday taping at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. The Martinez family from Phoenix had driven 18 hours in a borrowed car to be there. Lisa Martinez, 35, sat at the family podium with her 3 children. Diego, 14, Sofia, 12, and little Carmen, 8. They wore their best clothes, thrift store finds that Lisa had carefully selected and pressed the night before in their small apartment. What the audience didn't know was that 6 months ago, the Martinez family had nothing but the clothes on their backs and a desperate need to disappear. The game had started normally. Steve cracked his usual jokes. The scoreboard lit up. Families laughed. The Martinez family was trailing against the Johnson family from Memphis, but they were holding their own. Lisa answered questions with quiet confidence, her children cheering her on with the kind of fierce loyalty that spoke of survival, not just love. But during the 4th round, everything changed. The category was simple enough. Name something that makes you feel safe. Diego stepped up to the podium, his young shoulders carrying a weight that no 14-year-old should bear. He was small for his age, with dark eyes that seemed older than they should be. Diego, Steve said with his trademark warmth. What makes you feel safe, young man? Diego looked at his mother, then back at Steve. His voice, when it came, was steady but quiet. Locked doors. The answer hit the board at number 3, and the family celebrated. But Steve noticed something. Diego hadn't smiled. He'd given the right answer, but there was no joy in it, only truth. As the round continued, Steve kept glancing at the Martinez family. There was something different about them. They sat closer together than most families. Lisa's hand never left Sofia's shoulder. Carmen stayed pressed against her mother's side. And Diego watched every entrance to the studio like he was expecting someone. When it was Lisa's turn at the podium, Steve walked over with his usual energy. Now Lisa, tell us about your family, where y'all from? Lisa's smile was beautiful, but guarded. We're from Phoenix, Steve. Just me and my 3 babies. Just you. You're doing this all by yourself? The question was innocent enough, but Lisa's composure cracked just slightly. Yes, sir. We're a team. Steve noticed the pause, the careful choice of words. In his decades of hosting, he'd learned to read between the lines. Must be tough raising 3 kids on your own. That's when Diego stepped forward, abandoning his position at the podium. Steve, he said, his young voice cutting through the studio noise. Can I say something? The cameras kept rolling, but the atmosphere shifted. Steve looked at the boy, really looked at him, and saw something that made him set down his cards. What you want to say, son? Diego's hands were shaking now. My mom didn't choose to do this alone. His voice grew stronger, clearer. She saved us. The studio began to quiet. Not the prompted quiet of a commercial break, but the organic silence of people sensing something important was happening. She saved us from my dad, Diego continued, and now his voice cracked with emotion. He hurt her every day, and when he started hurting me and my sisters. Lisa started to rise from her seat, wanting to protect her son from having to say these words on national television. But Diego held up his hand. She took us in the middle of the night. We left everything. Our house, our toys, our friends. We lived in our car for 2 weeks, until we found a shelter. The silence was complete now. Steve Harvey, the man who had made America laugh for decades, found himself speechless. We've been living in a 1-bedroom apartment for 6 months, Diego said, tears streaming down his face now. But you know what? I feel safer in that tiny apartment with my mom and sisters than I ever did in our big house with him. That's when it happened. Steve Harvey did something unprecedented. He walked off his mark, around the podium, and directly to Diego. Without a word, he knelt down on the studio floor in his expensive suit and looked this brave boy in the eyes. "How old are you, son?" Steve asked, his voice barely audible. 14. 14, Steve repeated, shaking his head. "And you've been the man of the house, haven't you?" Diego nodded, unable to speak. Steve looked over at Lisa, who was crying openly now. "Ma'am, is this true?" Lisa wiped her eyes and stood up. "Steve, my children shouldn't have to know what fear feels like. But they do. They know because they lived it. And they know courage because they lived through it." The audience was completely silent. Camera operators were wiping their eyes. Even the Johnson family had abandoned their podium to listen. Steve stood up slowly and did something that broke every television rule. He stopped the game. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the studio, his voice thick with emotion, "we're going to pause this game for a moment, because this family just reminded me what courage really looks like." He walked to Lisa, who was now standing with all three of her children clustered around her. "Ma'am, I want you to know something. What you did, leaving everything to protect your babies. That's not just brave, that's heroic." Then Steve did something that would become legendary. He removed his suit jacket, the same jacket he wore for every taping, and he draped it over Lisa's shoulders. "This jacket has been with me through thousands of shows," he said. "But today it belongs with someone who understands what real strength looks like." Lisa broke down completely then, clutching the jacket around herself like armor. But Steve wasn't finished. He turned to Diego. "Young man, you just showed this whole studio what it means to stand up for your family. That's not a boy talking. That's a man." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his business card. "This has my personal number on it. Not for the show, not for business. For you, all of you, because what you've been through, what you're still going through, nobody should face alone." The studio erupted in applause, but it wasn't television applause. It was the sound of 300 people recognizing real courage when they saw it. But the most powerful moment was still to come. Little Carmen, who hadn't spoken all day, tugged on Steve's sleeve. He knelt down to her level. "Mr. Steve," she whispered, "are we safe here?" Steve's face crumbled. He pulled the 8-year-old into a hug and whispered back, "You're safe, baby girl. You're safe and you're loved and you're going to be okay." When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Steve Harvey did something extraordinary. He announced that both families would win the grand prize. But more than that, he connected the Martinez family with resources, safe housing, counseling, legal aid. The Johnson family, who had been competing against them, approached with tears in their eyes. "We don't need the money," Mrs. Johnson said firmly. "Give it all to them." It was a moment that proved humanity still existed in unexpected places. Behind the scenes, something even more remarkable was happening. Crew members were quietly approaching Lisa, slipping her their personal phone numbers, offering help. The makeup artist, who had noticed the faded bruises Lisa had carefully concealed, pressed a card into her hand, a women's shelter where she volunteered weekends. Steve walked the family to their dressing room personally, something he'd never done before. "Lisa," he said quietly, "I want you to know something. What you did wasn't just about saving your children. You saved yourself, and that took more courage than most people have in their entire lives." Lisa looked at him through tears. "Some days I wonder if I did the right thing. Starting over is so hard." "The right thing is rarely the easy thing," Steve replied. "But look at your babies. Look at Diego. That boy didn't learn to be strong by accident. He learned it from watching you." As they prepared to leave the studio, Carmen ran back to Steve and tugged his sleeve one more time. "Mr. Steve, will you remember us?" Steve knelt down one last time. "Baby girl, I could never forget you. And you know what? Every time someone watches this show, they're going to remember that courage comes in all sizes, even 8-year-old sizes. The aftermath of that episode rippled far beyond television. The show received over 50,000 letters from domestic violence survivors sharing their own stories. Women across the country found strength in Lisa's example. Shelters reported increased donations and volunteer applications. But perhaps the most powerful response came from an unexpected source. Men, fathers, brothers, sons who had watched Diego's brave words and realized that real masculinity meant protection, not control. 6 months later, Lisa Martinez graduated from nursing school, a dream she'd put on hold for years. Diego started high school with a full scholarship Steve had quietly arranged, and he'd grown 3 inches, no longer the small boy carrying adult fears. Sophia joined the school choir, her voice finally free to soar, and little Carmen stopped asking if they were safe, because for the first time in her young life, she truly was. The suit jacket Steve gave Lisa still hangs in her closet, but not as a relic. She wears it to job interviews, to parent-teacher conferences, to moments when she needs to remember her own strength. It's become her armor of courage. On the 1-year anniversary of their appearance, Steve received a letter. It was from Diego, now 15 and thriving. "Mr. Steve," it read, "you asked me what makes me feel safe. I know the answer now. It's not locked doors anymore. It's knowing that good people exist, that someone will always show up when you need them most. Thank you for showing up for us." The episode became the most watched in Family Feud history, not because of the game, but because it reminded viewers that behind every family on stage is a story, and sometimes those stories need to be heard, honored, and healed. Steve Harvey learned something that day that changed how he approached every subsequent show. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop playing the game and start seeing the people. Sometimes television isn't about entertainment at all. Sometimes it's about witnessing the moment when broken becomes brave, when surviving becomes thriving, and when a game show stage becomes a place where healing begins.